You know how this happens. You begin the week with one thing that really matters, or so you say to yourself. You have a decision in front of you that you have been avoiding and you decide to do it, or a piece of work that you really wanted to finish, or a conversation that would just clear up the air if you would just have it. But then the week opens up and then it starts pulling at you. First an email lands, then a customer wants an answer that took longer than expected. Then you sit down and you try to deal with one loose end and then you find yourself knee deep in 5 more unforeseen issues, and by the end of the day you have not been idle, far from it. You moved all day, you answered people, you did what looked necessary, but the very thing that mattered the most to you is still sitting there. Now that, my friends, is what we call drift. Most of the time, drift does not look dramatic. It looks like a week that just got crowded out. It looks like a person who means well and is trying really hard. And that is why it is actually dangerous. Because failure is easy to name, but drift is that much harder to catch. It can go on for quite some time before a person admits to himself of what is happening. Hi, I'm John Angeli, the Motivation Maverick, and this is AQMeets. We help busy creatives turn plans into proof, not with hype, with an execution OS. Subscribe for practical ideas that you can use today. There is a study from MIT that helps explain, in part, how this plays out. People were given a simple choice. You can buy a DVD for $14.99, or you do not buy it at all. Now, when this was presented, most people said yes to buying it. The second group was told that they could keep the $14.99 to make other purchases. In actuality, it was much the same choice, the same money, but a statistically different, measurable outcome occurred. Once the alternative was made visible, fewer people wanted now to buy the DVD. Now, this is not just a laboratory curiosity because it is part of all of our lives. When you lose an hour to your phone, for instance, your mind does not place beside that hour the walk that you could have taken instead, or the page that you could have written instead, or the decision you could have stopped postponing, and on and on. What you did not choose to do stays entirely out of sight. And this matters because hidden alternatives make bad choices feel much cheaper than they really are. The other part that research shows is the default setting. Defaults are doing much more of our living than most people would like to admit to themselves. Here's yet another example. Bridget Madrian studied retirement savings at a large American company. Now, before one policy change, about 61% of employees were participating in this particular plan. But the company decided to switch. They would make automatic enrollment into this plan unless the people chose to opt out of this plan. Now this time, participation magically jumped to 86%. Most people actually stayed with the default contribution rate and the default fund. They did not stay because they had compared all the options carefully on paper or even in their own minds. They simply stayed there simply because the choice had been made for them and they never quite came back to reopen the issue. And I bring this up because this pattern is not limited to retirement accounts, of course. It really shows up in the way that we structure our own weeks, in the way that our businesses start taking up our time, in the way that our families start speaking to one another when everybody is tired, and in the way that a person lowers their standards, calls it temporary, and then gets used to it. And none of this looks dramatic in the moment. It sounds more like this. Oh, well, I had a lot on lately. I'll deal with that once things calm down. It's perhaps not ideal, but it is fine for now. And for plenty of people for now, this turns into a way of life. The rhythm hardens, the exception becomes the new normal. They are living inside choices that they're never really made. Most drift in life survives because people assume they would notice it if it were really serious. And that is a comforting idea. But it is also false. You often notice it when it is too late. Health, for instance, makes this obvious. The World Health Organization reported that adherence to long-term therapy in developed countries averages at just 50%. In other words, half of the people with chronic conditions do not actually follow through with the treatment plans that were meant to protect their health in the future. And it does not happen because half the population is foolish per se. It happens because delayed costs are easy to negotiate with. One missed dose does not feel that decisive, does it? One skipped walk does not really feel like a decline. Putting something off until next week does not really feel that harsh, does it? But then the pattern sets in and the bill turns up much, much later. And the same pattern shows up in work, in marriage, in parenting, in business. Really, it's everywhere. The philosopher Aristotle had a word for this version of the problem, and he called it akrasia, the issue of knowing what is right and yet still failing to do it. Modern psychology uses a different phrase, the intention-execution gap, and I have a separate video that talks all about it, but the point is the same. A person can admire the right things, argue for the right things, and even teach on these right things, and yet still they do not do them. Which brings us to the question then, what can we actually do about this? And by the way, if all this is of interest to you, I am presenting a free 2-day forum on how to use AI and HI, artificial intelligence and human intelligence, for how to have a decade year, or how to accomplish in 1 year what can take most people 10 years or never. You just need to register at decadeyear.accumulate.com or click the link in the description in the section below to find out more information about it. Now let's get back to our talk. What can we do about this? What helps most people is to just make the pattern visible. And you can begin with just an honest question. What is this choice really replacing? If I say yes to this interruption, what does it inevitably push aside? If I keep living like this for another month, what will begin to thin out in my life? If I leave this decision sitting here for yet another week, what sort of future will form around this delay? Simple questions like these matter because drift most often survives when trade-offs stay hidden. Second, you can shorten feedback loops. They help a lot. If you only check in on how your goals are going at the end of a quarter, then drift has 11 quiet weeks to move you off course. If you only look seriously at your relationships when they feel cold, then you are often too late, aren't you? So you need to review sooner. And when you review, do not ask only what you had meant to do. Ask what the week actually produced. This is a tougher question, but it is also a more honest one. Third, another correction is to stop speaking to yourself as if through a fog. Don't just say to yourself, look, I'll get to this task later, because this language gives drift more room to breathe. Instead, you want to tie actions to something definitive, specific, and concrete. Give yourself a specific time when you will actually get to it. Tell yourself, what will that trigger be? What is going to be the condition that is going to tell you to go to that next step? What is the rule that's going to tell you when to switch yourself on? Say something along the lines, when X happens, I will do Y. At hour X, I will begin task Z. If that obstacle shows up, I'm going to do plan B. Now, fourth, you can also get into the habit of asking the hard questions. Questions like, would I choose for myself this schedule that I set up for myself if I had to live my life over again? Would the current habits with my phone be still in place if I only had 1 month to live? This way of carrying on with these kind of serious questions, they will indeed expose certain things. Most people avoid questions like this because they suspect that they may expose something critical. And it is fair enough, they will indeed expose certain things. But isn't it better when you can change things, when you still have the opportunity to make things better? And the last point to make is to consider one more idea for how to overcome drift. Consider your environment. Remember that private discipline is real, but this is not the whole story because our environments make drift that much more easier. A digital environment that is built to seize our attention will certainly not train you to be a person of depth. An organization that rewards the visibly busy people instead of the people that are working on the things that matter is a recipe for disaster. So you don't want to have an environment or a system that's full of friction, because this will make follow-through of the actual plan that much harder. Wisdom is both about morals and the structure that helps you accomplish those morals. Yes, you have to choose, but you also have to look at what surroundings keep you making the wrong choices. It is a sign of wisdom to try to be quiet, to reduce noise, to install regular reviews, and to protect the conditions that allow us to think deeply. Just look at the week that you actually lived. Look at what keeps slipping through. Look at what keeps sabotaging your best hours. And this is why awareness of our tendency to drift matters. Because drift is quiet, drift accumulates, and drift can also look perfectly respectable from the outside. And yet people can lose years, if not decades, in their lives living by the way of drift. It won't be through outrageous decisions that they mess up. It's most often through boring postponements, through unexamined default settings that we live by, or through the pattern of letting the urgent and the tempting to take over what is really important. So do not wait for a final collapse in your life. Look at the tendency to drift much earlier. Name the drift while it is small, shorten the feedback loop on your reviews, bring the trade-offs into clear view, challenge the default state by which you organize your life, because your days are already deciding the direction of your life. The only question is whether you are a part of this decision. Carpe diem.